and solve the problems we need. And I think I can do a better job. So at the time, I was 24, he was 28. I said, Vivek, are you sure you want to start your own company? Are you sure you don't want to work for another company first, see kind of how the system works, and then go off and start your own company? And he said no, because this pharmaceutical industry is where the corruption lies. You don't go in and try to change it from the inside. That's not how it works. You have to start as an outsider. And so that's what he did. He went in, and that company now has had 5 drugs approved since then in the last decade.
Thank you.
There's literally children now who, when I was in med school, we learned that if they had this condition, they would die within the first 2 years. And because of the medicines developed by these companies, they can lead a normal life. So that's what he was doing back in 2020. He was running this company. It was already worth billions of dollars. And he came to me and he said, Apoorva, there's something wrong going on here. There are companies like BlackRock and Vanguard and State Street who are coming to CEOs like me and trying to tell us how to run our companies. They're telling us how we should hire. They're telling us how much we have to allocate for climate change. And this isn't good for my company. And it's not good for democracy either, because the country does not need CEOs deciding these things. We should be deciding these topics at the ballot box. So this is not good for business, and it's not good for democracy. So he wrote a book about it. He wrote Woke Inc. about this topic back in 2021. But then he didn't just write a book. He actually stepped down from that company that he had founded and started a new company called Strive that was actually an alternative to BlackRock and State Street and these other companies that are pushing these agendas on us through the back door that none of us would vote for through the front door on the ballot box. So that's what he was doing then last year in 2022 when he came to me and he said, Apoorva, now the problems that these 2 boys are going to face are not something that I can start a company to fix. We have to go in and do it as President of the United States of America. And I said to him, Vivek, are you sure you have to start as president? Can you do like a governor or senator, or is there some other job? And he said, no, because you have to go to the head of the beast. You have to be the outsider and stay out of the corruption, because that's where it'll get you. And that is why I know this man is the one for the job, because he sees the problems and he knows how to actually finish them. And so that's where we've been. We've been on this process, and it's so amazing to now look around this room and see so many dear friends that we've made over this past year. And we have learned so much from you, and we are so grateful for everything that you have taught us about this wonderful country. And we're so much more excited for what's going to happen next week when all of you get to choose who is President of the United States of America, or who is the Republican candidate. And I'm very confident that after you get to meet him, you'll be pretty excited about this guy. So I'll let you get to it.
Thank you. Thank you. Our future First Lady. I'm incredibly proud of Apoorva and the example she's going to set for kids, young boys and girls across this country in that White House. And we are doing this together as a family for that next generation, for our 2 sons and their generation. We've lost our sense of who we are. And what pulled me into this when I had that conversation with Apoorva about a little over a year ago, the thing that actually really made it click for me was that red wave that never came. You guys remember that?
Yep.
Yeah. They blamed it on everything from abortion to Donald Trump to whatever. I think there's something deeper. We as a Republican Party, we have grown lazy. We are lost. And I don't just mean lost in terms of the get out the vote operation sense of lazy or lost. I mean lazy in terms of defining even who we are and what we actually stand for. Biden bad, that's not an agenda. That's what we tried to push and assume that was going to win a midterm cycle. No, the left is actually very good at this. They will give you a vision. It's not the right vision, but they'll give you something. Race, gender, sexuality, climate. And we're sitting here criticizing that vision without offering an alternative vision of our own. What do we actually stand for? What does it mean to be a Republican in the year 2024? What does it mean to be an American in the year 2024? To me, it means we believe in the ideals of 1776. And if there's two things that I'm going to restore in this country as your next president, two ideals that go back to our founding, they're basic ideals. It's not left-wing or right-wing, they're basic rules of the road. The first is that we, the people, create a government that is accountable to us, not the other way around. That the people who we elect to run the government ought to be the ones who actually run the government, not the shadow government in the deep state that's running the show today. If there's one thing I get done as your next president, if there's one war that I will wage as your president, not some pointless foreign war abroad, it will be the war on our own shadow government right here at home. We're going to get in there and actually shut down the deep state and actually do it this time. You don't know how we're going to do it? In my first day in office, we will initiate a mass firing of 75% of the federal bureaucrats in Washington, D.C. That's how you drain the swamp. Get serious about getting that job done. When there are government agencies that should no longer exist, from the FBI, you got it, to the ATF, to the CDC, to the U.S. Department of Education, IRS, Food and Nutrition Services. I go to Nuclear Regulatory Commission. We got a full list. We're not going to just reform them anymore. We're going to get in there and actually shut them down. That's how you revive the integrity of this constitutional republic. These aren't just slogans to me. It's a clear plan for how we're going to do this. The FBI. We've got 35,000 employees sitting in the back office of the J. Edgar Hoover building. For God's sake, that's what they still call it. Of the FBI. We don't need that. 20,000 of them are back office bureaucrats. They're going to go home and find honest work. 15,000 of them, these are cops, investigative agents on the front lines. Good people. We will move them to the U.S. Marshals or to the DEA, both of which have actually been far more effective than the FBI at fighting child sex trafficking or the fentanyl epidemic, but without that same level of corruption. The Department of Education, I'll abolish it, not because I'm against education, but because I am for education in this country. $80 billion of our taxpayer money funneled through that federal agency. Give it back to parents across this country who deserve to choose where they send their kids to school. 3 armed security guards in every school across this country to ensure something like what happened in Perry never happens again in this country. For a tiny fraction of that budget, it's not even close. What's a better use of money? It's going to take a CEO in the White House to get this done, to say, you know what? We're not going to look at last year's budget, which is based on the prior year's budget, which is based on the prior year's budget before that, all of which is corrupt, and that's how you get to a $34 trillion national debt problem. The way we're going to do it is we're going to start with 0 as the baseline. That's how we're actually going to do this. 0-based budgeting, that's how you tackle that national debt problem. Takes a CEO to get it done. That's what I'm bringing to the table. This isn't controversial. It shouldn't be. This is common sense. And yes, to accomplish this for the long run in our country, we do need lasting change in the way we run our elections. Single-day voting on Election Day as a national holiday with paper ballots, government-issued voter ID to match the voter file. And yes, English as the sole language on the ballot, that's not too much to ask. This is how you drain the swamp. The people who we elect to run the government ought to be the ones who actually run the government. And those people, including the president, owe a moral duty to the citizens of this nation. Not any other one. This one right here at home, the United States of America. As a father of 2 sons, I can tell you this. My moral duty is to my family, period, and I won't be shaken in that. As your next president, my sole moral duty is to you, the citizens of the United States of America. And that's why I've said that as your next president, I will use our own military, not to protect somebody else's border halfway around the world when it doesn't advance our interest, but that I'll use our own military to protect our own borders right here in the United States of America. On day 1, we will move our troops to our southern border and our northern border too. That's what it means to stand for the rule of law in the United States of America. Thank you. We're going to end birthright citizenship for the kids of illegals who are in this country. That's what the Constitution says. That's what starts on January 20th, 2025. We're going to make sure anybody who's in this country illegally is returned to their country of origin and use the law, including local law enforcement, to do it. The federal government has the power to empower local law enforcement to get this job done. That's how we get it done in this country. End of foreign aid to Central America or Mexico. Require every one of those countries to build a border wall on their own borders, all the way from Venezuela to the northern border of Mexico. That's how you stop the northward flow of migrants. Stop using our taxpayer money to pay for the federal funding of sanctuary cities that are literally using that money to break the rule of law in this country. So my foreign policy is clear. You want to know what I'm going to do with our national defense spending? I'll keep us out of World War III. I'll declare independence from communist China and then use our own national defense spending, what a radical idea here, to defend our own homeland. It's not too much to ask in a president. So these aren't black ideas or white ideas. These aren't even really Democrat ideas or Republican ideas. Not really. These are American ideals that we fought a revolution in 1776 to secure. And I think we live in a 1776 moment today. I believe these ideals still exist, but I believe we're going to have to work hard to revive them. That's what January 15th is about. That's what this election is about. Reviving the ideals of the American Revolution. If you want incremental change, somebody to increase or decrease the tax rate by 1% here or there and gives you some cosmetic changes and call it a day, I'm not your guy. But if you want to revive the ideals of the American Revolution, there's nobody else in this race that's going to deliver that for you like I will. And every one of your voices and votes in that Iowa caucus in about 10 days, it's the equivalent of about 1 million people in the impact that it has in choosing the next president. I'm going to ask you all to do your part. We're going to open this up in a second, but tell everybody in this community, tell 10 people that you know what we are talking about today. Bring them too. And if you all do your part, I promise you, my family and I, Apurva and I, we will do ours to make sure, not in some fake politician way, but in a true way, to make sure that our country's best days are actually still ahead of us. And we will not stop until we get that job done. Thank you for coming today, guys. God bless you and your families and our United States of America. Now, in about 18 months, I'm about to sit across the table from Xi Jinping, so I can handle the hard ones. Let's open it up. You guys got a decision to make in about 10 days, and we're asking for you for your help, so my job here is to give you clear answers. We'll start here, and then we'll go to the back.
Yes.
We'll start right here, and then we'll come to you.
Thank you. Craig Lang. I certainly appreciate what you are bringing truth to each one of us. The only question I have is on military spending. I think at a time when Israel needs our support, that we need to give them the support we can. But I do believe that we need to protect our own country. So how do you rationalize a small soul in the Middle East trying to keep peace that needs our support?
So Israel does need our support, and I'm going to tell you the support we should give them. This is better for Israel and better for the United States. And I think it's become clearer. I've been at this position since day one, and initially people questioned my stance. Now, some of the staunchest pro-Israel voices in Israel are saying exactly what I'm about to tell you. The way we stand for Israel is by diplomatically providing them what I call a diplomatic iron dome. Give them the absolute right diplomatically to defend themselves without the UN or the EU or the US getting in their way. Israel has a right to defend itself. I think from Israel's perspective, Israel has a responsibility to defend itself. What Hamas did to Israel was subhuman. It was medieval. It was wrong. Yet today, what's actually happening is the UN to the EU to even the US is using some small strings attached to tie their hands, second-guessing their decisions. And that's understandable because if the US is involved, then we have to take responsibility for what they do because there could be backlash to the U.S. because then we're involved in that war, which requires us to second-guess decisions that they're making. They don't need us to get this job done. What they need is for everybody else to stop second-guessing what they're doing and get out of the way. And so I think it's better for the U.S. and for Israel if we do not intervene militarily or financially in this war. They're not financially constrained. They're not constrained, militarily constrained. They're diplomatically constrained. And so that's why true America First policies are better for America and better for America's allies, while also keeping us out of being mired in foreign wars, especially in the Middle East, that haven't advanced our interests. Usually we show up, it's like a bull in a china shop, we make a mess, we leave a bigger mess than when we arrived. For God's sake, Iraq is a more broken country now than before we invaded. The Taliban is still in charge in Afghanistan 20 years later, except we accumulated $7 trillion of our national debt from those two wars, not to mention, most importantly, the tens of thousands of our own sons and daughters' lives that were sacrificed in those wars. So neither Iraq nor Afghanistan is any better off for it, and Israel knows that. And so, this is the thing about me as a Republican candidate is I don't recite the standard GOP talking points, but when it comes to the actual principle, it turns out that adopting what I think is a deeply pro-American perspective that would make George Washington proud in his 1796 farewell address. A George Washington America First conservative does what David Ben-Gurion, the George Washington figure for Israel, would have wanted for Israel as well. So my conversation with Bibi is clear. You got terrorists on your southern border, you defend yourself against them. And you know what? We're going to defend ourselves against terrorists at our own southern border if that ever happens here in the United States too. So that's going to be my answer, and that's how we'll lead this country in a way that's pro-America. And I believe actually is the most pro-Israel view in either political party. That's what it means to actually stand for our allies. Thank you for your question, sir. I appreciate it. And then we'll come to you after that. It's good to be here. It's good to be back. Yeah. I'm going to have to admit, last time as I was leaving, I got that slushies. This time I walked in and sat right next to it. I couldn't resist. It's a pretty darn good slushie.
I have a lot of concerns, sir. One of them is Bill Gates. How are you going to control him? Because he's got a lot of leverage. Number two is how are you going to rebuild our military? Because I'm a veteran also.
You are. Thank you.
He addressed one of them.
So okay.
Thank you.
Good. Thank you. Thank you. So may I address your question about the military? And you had a third one. Good. You remember.
Did I say Epstein's Island?
Well, it kind of relates to your first one. It's kind of related.
I have a lot of concerns, and I'm hoping you're the man to do it.
Thank you. You know what I've said, and I was the first and only candidate to say it, and I stand by it. I don't think the government's told us the truth about that. Just tell us the truth. Even a day like today, and it's a different topic, but it's the same theme, January 6th, the third anniversary. Just tell us the truth about what happened. We have a government that has a systematic problem with telling the truth. Every one of those clients on the Jeffrey Epstein client list, the truth about the investigation of what did or didn't happen, just tell us the truth. We have a government that has systematically lied to its people, so I've said, we're going to have total transparency, release that to the public, and if there's bad actors who have actually broken the law, hold them accountable to the fullest extent of the law, because we have one standard of the rule of law in this country, and I won't apologize for that. So that's the answer. We, the people, deserve a government that tells us the truth again in this country. And that's going to take somebody who isn't bought and paid for. I mean, the problem with our politics now is every politician dances to the tune of their biggest donor. And in my case, my biggest donor is and always will be me. That's right. Well, she's the opposite, she's the embodiment of everything wrong with our politics today. Keep the foreign war machine humming to fund a family-owned military contracting firm. Join the board of Boeing after you scratch their back for years as a governor. And it's wrong when Democrats do it, and it's wrong when Republicans do it. So I would say end the corruption, total transparency. By the way, if you're in Congress, stop trading individual stocks. If you're a bureaucrat, you shouldn't be allowed to trade individual stocks. It should be banned. You should not be able to lobby the government for at least 10 years. I would say ever, but at least 10 years until after you've left the government. You shouldn't be joining the boards of companies that you've done special favors for or regulated. This is basic rules of the road. Term limits in Congress, 3 in the Congress, 2 in the Senate, basic rules of the road. If I can't work for you as your next president for more than 8 years, neither should any of those federal bureaucrats reporting into me either. 8-year term limits for every bureaucrat in Washington, D.C. That, too, is how you drain the swamp and end the corruption. And if you want somebody, thank you, somebody who's going to get in there and speak truth to power, then start by voting for the person who's going to speak the truth to you. I'm the only person in this race who said I will strip vaccine manufacturers of the special shield from liability that every other product manufacturer doesn't have. Why should a vaccine manufacturer have it? The only person to tell you, Ronna McDaniel should step aside as the failed, corrupt chairwoman of the RNC after 5 failed years of leadership, because it's the right thing to do. Then I'll pardon every peaceful J6 protester on day 1 in office, because it's the right thing to do for this country. To tell you the CO2 pipeline making its way across the other part of this state, using eminent domain to violate the private property rights of farmers, is unconstitutional and wrong. And it's based on a climate change agenda that absolutely is a hoax, because it has nothing to do with the climate. Ask yourself why I'm the only candidate who can even tell you these things. It's because every politician's turned into a puppet. And I'd rather speak the truth and lose the election than to win by playing some fake game of political snakes and ladders. But my bet is that's going to be the winning strategy. And that's not up to me. That's up to you. It's not my choice. It's yours. And so if that's what you want, that's what you get to get. Because if I win the Iowa caucus, I'm your next president. And if I'm your next president, everything that I'm telling you we get done, we actually get done, including reviving the strength of our military in this country, which is your other question. Thank you. Well, I believe in one standard of the rule of law for every American. So anybody who's broken the law deserves to be held accountable to the fullest extent of the law. I don't care if you're there's no such thing as above the law. It doesn't work that way. Now, I want to address your question about the military, though. The military question is important. We have a 25% recruitment deficit in our U.S. military because, A, young people don't want to serve a country they're taught to hate, and B, young people have grown up into an era where you have the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan that didn't advance their interests, and also, they see how we treat our veterans on the back end. That's the dirty little underbelly of this. Young people aren't stupid. They say, if you're going to send me to go die in somebody else's war, when I come back here, you don't take care of me. So I'm left to turn to fentanyl and 40 veterans a day committing suicide in this country. A country that doesn't respect its own veterans is not a country. And so I think there's basic changes we can make in standing for our veterans to revive national pride in this country. Decompression buffers, 6 weeks paid. When you come back here, that brings down the rate of PTSD by over 80%. To say that you have privacy restrictions, to be able to report your PTSD so you don't get tagged with the red flag law, which is why many veterans don't report their PTSD. Absolute medical choice for veterans, many of whom turn to fentanyl or suicide, but they should be able to access Schedule I drugs that should be descheduled. Ayahuasca, ketamine, psilocybin, all of which are better options, should be medically available through the VA to treat PTSD that are not available today. So these are basic changes that shouldn't be Republican ideas or Democrat ideas. These are basic American ideals to stand for those who have served this country. And one pledge that I will make to the members of the military today, and easy things we can do, by the way, active duty military compensation and veterans benefits should not be subject to federal taxation. That's something that we can say, I actually want to stand for our troops. Here's how you stand for our troops, not just with lip service, but with action. But I'll say this, as my top obligation to the young men and women who serve is that, actually all young men and women in this country, because it could affect them if we enter World War III too, is that you shouldn't have $200,000 of somebody else's national debt on your shoulders that you didn't sign up for. That is unjust. And that you shouldn't have somebody else's gun over your shoulder in somebody else's trench fighting somebody else's war. If we're going to use our military, it will be to protect the interests of the American citizens here in our homeland. That's how we actually strengthen this country. And what hope does the rest of the world have if the shining city on a hill no longer shines? That's what I'm going to deliver as your next commander-in-chief, and I appreciate that question. We'll go right here.
Hello. Hey, it's really a pleasure to be here. I admire and appreciate your campaign and the things you stand for. Consider myself a patriotic American, former active duty service member. I think the biggest thing I admire about your campaign is really standing for principle, standing for, particularly with truth and parents and transparency, accountability, open debate. You really put yourself out there and you take challengers in, and I think that makes you come off as more trustworthy and exciting to see for the audience. When you look at the average politician. So with that, I just want to ask, in your capacity as the president, if you could kind of walk us through the tactics on how you make the government more accountable and transparent, what that really looks like top to bottom.
Yeah, so it's a great question. Thank you, sir. And thank you for your service to this country as well. It's an example, hopefully, from young people to revive that same national pride in this country. And I promise to be a good partner with you on that. That's my top job as your next president, actually, is to revive that missing national pride in our country. Part of the way we're going to get there is actually restoring that sense of accountability in government. The main obstacle to accountability in government is that fourth branch of government, that administrative state, that permanent state. They're the ones that run the show. It's not Congress, it's not the Senate, it's not even the president. I mean, I don't sit here bashing Joe Biden, largely because there's no point to it. He's not really the president, not in any meaningful sense. He's a puppet for the permanent state that sits underneath him. And I refuse to be a puppet sitting in that White House. So I bring some accountability in. I come in as a CEO. I know that if somebody works for you and you can't fire them, that means they don't work for you. It means really you work for them because you're responsible for what they do without any authority to change it. Right, so that's the reality is you want to bring accountability first, get the people who are never elected to be there out of there. So the rest of them actually have to take the responsibility for enacting policies, not in the back room of some three-letter government agency building, the SEC to the FTC to the FDA to the God knows what. But instead actually make the people in Congress and the Senate take responsibility for the actual laws we pass, and then you get to vote them out if you don't want them there. That's how we restore accountability, starting as the next president is shut down that deep state. And yes, can the president do it? You're darn right the president can. This is where they duped Donald Trump. Right, they told him, hey, these civil servants, they have civil service protections. Read the law. Those civil service protections do not apply to mass firings. And yes, mass firings are absolutely what I am bringing to the D.C. bureaucracy. This is where they duped Trump. They said you couldn't end birthright citizenship for the kids of illegals. Well, read the 14th Amendment. Actually, it doesn't apply to them already. You need a president who swears an oath to the Constitution and keeps it. That's part of what gives us our sense of purpose, our sense of duty in this race. I think God gives each of us our own unique gifts. That's what our faith teaches us. We're Hindu, a little bit different than the traditional faith background of people who have run, but grounded in the same values, the same Judeo-Christian values that this nation was founded on. I believe in one true God. I believe he puts us here for a purpose, that it is our moral duty to realize that purpose, to use our own God-given gifts to do what's right in the short time that we are given. That we're all equal. God works through us in different ways, but we are still equal because God resides in each of us. That's the heart of my faith. And in this journey, it's my faith that leads me here, actually. I think right now it's going to take a president who both brings sharp elbows, can break things when necessary. And yes, I've been doing that on the debate stage and other parts of this race a little bit, and I'm going to bring that on steroids to Washington, D.C., okay? That's what it's going to take. But also an outsider who knows and deeply understands the law and the Constitution of this country. And they're not going to be able to dupe me in the same way. That's how we take our America First agenda to the next level. By actually using the law and the Constitution of this country on our side. That's how we restore accountability. And I thank you again for your service, and hopefully young men and women can follow a country where we do have that accountability. That's part of how we also revive the national pride that we're missing today. So thank you, man. I appreciate it. We'll go right there and then next to you.
That's Ukraine. Why are we spending money on Ukraine? When I know that...
Yeah. I mean, do you want the real answer?
All money's getting spent and stolen away.
Yeah. We're sending $200 billion of our own taxpayer money to Ukraine so some kleptocrat can buy a bigger house. That's what's going on. One of those kleptocrats is a gentleman by the name of Hunter Biden. I mean, the same country that paid a $5 million bribe to Hunter Biden, do you think it's an accident that that same country then gets $200 billion of our own taxpayer money? It's not. It's rank corruption. And the person who's most vocally pushing for a war in Ukraine from the Republican Party field, although most of the Republican Party is in favor of it, is somebody who owns a military contracting firm that again stands to make money off, you guessed it, war. So I think a lot of this is the product of corruption. Ukraine's one of the most corrupt nations on planet Earth, actually. And so it's this, that's part of it's the cynical corruption. Part of it is this outdated philosophy about fighting the USSR, failing to realize that the USSR doesn't exist anymore. The real threat we face is communist China. And by arming Ukraine to the teeth, we're driving Russia further into China's hands, which actually strengthens China. So we're using our own money that we should be using to protect our own borders to instead not only fund some kleptocracy corruption, but even to increase the risk of World War III at a time in our history where, God forbid, should we enter World War III, we're actually at risk of losing it. That's what we're doing today. So that ends on my watch. It's a broken foreign policy establishment, and it's going to take somebody coming in from the outside with fresh legs to actually get this right. I will end that war with a diplomatic agreement that keeps Ukraine's sovereignty intact, that's fine, but does a deal that requires Russia to exit its alliance with China. That's how I'll save our money and keep us out of World War III. That's the answer to your question.
Question number 2. What's the real reason why Russia's in Ukraine?
What's the real reason why Russia's in Ukraine?
Because our local media is not telling the real truth.
Yeah, no, I think there's a lot of reasons why Russia's in Ukraine. I'll tell you what, there's truth, there's some element of truth to the account, is I think that, Putin's a guy with an ego. And I think we can use that in our favor, right? He doesn't enjoy being Xi Jinping's little brother, so I want to use that. But part of this is NATO expansionism. NATO expanded more after the fall of the USSR than it ever did during the existence of the USSR, when NATO's purpose was to deter the USSR. That doesn't make any sense. I was talking to someone about this earlier today. James Baker, our Secretary of State, made a commitment to Gorbachev, the leader of the Soviet Union, in 1990, that NATO would expand not 1 inch past East Germany. We've violated that agreement many times over. And so we're surprised. Were you surprised, we're expanding what Putin sees as our sphere of influence around Russia? Well, he's been very clear that if we did not make a hard commitment that NATO won't admit Ukraine to NATO, he'd invade. That's exactly what he did. And so the things you're trying to say here, the things they'll say, is that Putin sympathizer talk? No, it's not. Do I trust Putin? Absolutely not. Just as I barely trust anybody else who's running another country. But I can trust them to follow their self-interest, and they can trust us to follow ours. And so I think the right thing for us to do is get Russia out of that relationship with China that we basically forced them into, reopen some economic relations with Russia, end that Ukraine war on reasonable terms, and then focus on the real threat, which is communist China. And the reason we're scared of China, if that was a Russian spy balloon flying over half the United States, you know what we would have done? We'd have shot it down in an instant and ratcheted up sanctions. If that was a Russian spy base on eastern half of the United States sitting in Cuba right now, we'd have had it shut down long ago. We didn't do it for China because we're scared. Why are we scared? Because we depend on them for our modern way of life, from 95% of our pharmaceuticals to, for God's sake, our own military equipment depends on China, the F-35 jets that we make in this country included. So that's where we got to focus. And our foreign policy establishment has it completely backwards. The same people have been crashing your car for 25 years. You want to turn over the keys to the same people again? Or you want to try somebody who actually understands with fresh legs and a fresh mind what's actually going on to protect our own interests? That's how I'm going to lead this country. Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. Thank you. We'll go next to you.
Well, back when Trump was president, my 401 looked pretty damn good. And now I have less money and everything is so much more expensive. I honestly am going to have to postpone my retirement probably 3 more years just to be able to make up for that. So what are you going to do to be able to help turn that part of our...
Sure. And I want to say a word about this because do you expect to collect Social Security then later on? You've been paid into it for a long time. Yeah, well, you should, deserve to. You've paid into it. America last policy, right? I talk about America first. What does America last? Cut Social Security and Medicare to ship more money to Ukraine. That's what most of the Republican Party actually favors. Just grab a water if you don't mind. It's disgusting me so much. Barely speaking.
Is it real water?
The thing I will say is, here's how we address our national debt, but without actually touching Social Security or Medicare. I think you deserve to have what's actually been paid into the
Vivek
system.
just is thirsty.
Even better. Even better, actually.
Losing his voice over there.
Every bit as good. Thank you. So, punchline on addressing the national debt. Let's get to the punchline. Get the oil and natural gas out from underneath our ground and sell it. Buys down $8 trillion of our national debt instantly and grows our economy as a result. Next thing, avoid those foreign wars. That's $7 trillion just from Iraq and Afghanistan. Cut 75% of the federal bureaucracy as I've said I would do, you got our national debt problem under control. Growing this economy, how do we do it? Right now, prices are going up. Interest rates, mortgage rates are going up. Wages have remained flat. Well, Bidenomics aside, that's what every American understands. They can feel it in their own pocketbook. You want to unlock this economy? Let's unlock the supply of everything. Drill, frack, burn coal, embrace nuclear. That brings down the cost of energy. It grows this economy. Stop paying people more money to stay at home instead of to go to work. That's what's stopping most small businesses from being able to grow. That unlocks this economy. The housing constraints in this country. There's stopping new housing construction for small lots based on land use restrictions. Lift those land use restrictions. That increases the supply of housing, brings it down, grows this economy. So this is second nature for me. We know how to get this. We know how to get this job done. Oh, I love that. So we're going to bring the income tax and we're going to actually flatten out the income tax. One flat tax, 12% across the board. Income, ordinary income, capital gain, corporate, across the board, and eliminate the crony deductions. That I can do with the existing budget. That alone saves that out of the gate. So that stimulates this economy. We know how to do this. And eventually I'd love to get rid of it altogether, but you bring it down to 12%, we're doing pretty darn well. Now, what if I told you there was a way that we could actually increase your Social Security benefits without adding to our national debt? Because right now, many people collecting Social Security have had the value of that Social Security inflated away as costs have gone up. Now they can't actually live a life that they were planned to live, which is fundamentally unfair because they paid into that system. Here's how we do it. It's a basic thing called math, subject we sometimes forget in this country. 40 years ago, if the Social Security Trust Fund had been allowed to be invested in a diversified portfolio of stocks, bonds, treasuries, the average person collecting $1,800 per month in Social Security today would be collecting close to $18,000 per month today. $18,000 per month check in your mailbox. What a difference that would make. That is government malpractice of the highest order. Can't change the past, but we can change the future. We can start doing it now so that the next generation can still have that without cutting a dime of those benefits for the past generation. It's going to take a CEO in the White House to do this. If an existing politician were going to get this done from either party, frankly, it would have happened already. But it hasn't. And so I think it's going to take somebody from the outside, from the next generation with fresh legs, to reach and lead the new generation and actually to grow this economy. And when we grow this economy, that's how we bring back, it's partly how we bring back that national pride. Young people tend to be more proud of a country where they're making more money in that country. I mean, I'd love to look a young person in the eye and tell you the American dream is alive and well. But it's not. Right now, it's alive and hanging on for life support. But it can be. And I think it's going to take somebody who understands the basics of how you unlock this economy and a commitment to actually do it to make sure that economically speaking, our best days can be ahead of us as well. So thank you very much. I appreciate that. Right there in the back, we'll take those couple of questions.
Very good. Thank you. I appreciate everything you're saying, and I love hearing from the vets. I'm also a vet, which is kind of a sign to me because I've never been to one of these in my 51 years, and you got a whole room full of vets, and that tells me what's going on. So I don't know if these guys have the same sentiment as I do, but this is what I'd like to know. When Trump came through and he had all the things that we wanted to hear, he said all the things we wanted to hear. We wanted an outsider, we want a bulldog, we want somebody who's going to come in and make change. He got to the White House, they circled the wagons,
yes,
they stomped the mud hole, they made everything ugly. I think even if the guy really wanted to get it done, he wasn't going to get it done. Because the government, like you're saying, they weren't going to let it happen. Tell me what you can do that's not going to put you in the same boat, that's going to put you in the same mud hole.
So I think there's a couple things. Thank you. It's a very honest question. And I am actually honored to have so many veterans who have served this country in this room, too. Thank you for your service to this country. We owe it to the next generation to recognize that. I'll tell you, they duped Donald Trump is what happened. Right? If you go in to strike the swamp strikes back. You got to move quickly. Day one for me in office. You know, we're going to have to cut in half the federal bureaucracy outside of the military, but in non-military roles. If your Social Security number ends in an odd number, you're out. If it's an even number, you're in. It's got to be something like that. 50% cut day one. On day two, everything still functions the same way. The sun will still rise in the east and set in the west, but the federal government will be half its size. You have to be willing to shut down agencies like the FBI that otherwise frustrated its purpose. You can't staff people in your administration who are hostile to your own agenda. From the John Boltons to the Nikki Haley's of the world, they will come nowhere near my administration. And we got to have a commitment and the discipline to see that through. And so I respect Donald Trump. He got this fight started, but now it's our job to finish it. The way I look at it, he rolled over that log in the swamp, and we saw what crawled out. I'm bringing the pesticide. That's what I'm doing. And I'm doing it with an understanding of the law and the Constitution. See, I think that if you don't have that understanding yourself, the advisors from that same swamp class, they're going to dupe you. But for me, as I said, my faith teaches me God puts us here for a purpose. And I think one of the things that I have that he doesn't is that understanding, first personally, of that law and the Constitution, such that, you know what, are they going to sue me when we do this? Of course they will. We'll take it to the Supreme Court. We'll win 6-3. Then the next guy who comes after me won't have his hands tied in the same way. That's how we drive real, lasting change in this country. And so I do think it's important to have somebody who is a businessman, can be a good vehicle for advancing these ideas, but also somebody who's actually ideological about them at their own core. See, for me, it is my faith that leads me to this journey. I think it is my moral duty to this country to see this through. And I think when you view it that way, then I don't think anybody's going to stop us. We're going to move quickly. We're going to get started. Not start with the legislative agenda. That's where most presidents get tripped up. They say, oh, we'll go through Congress. That's where the health care reform agenda and everything else didn't happen. Because you try to work through Congress, it's designed not to work. The things I'm promising you, shutting down 75% of the federal bureaucracy, moving our troops to our own southern border, bringing them back from places like Germany to Ukraine where our military equipment is, where they don't need to be. I get to do that as your next president, as your commander-in-chief, without asking Congress for permission or for forgiveness. I think most of what we're going to get done, most history teaches us you get done in the first 12 months. And the most of that I want to get done in the first 6 months. Right out of the gate, end birthright citizenship for the kids of the illegals. Move the troops to both borders. Grow this economy. Rescind the unconstitutional regulations so we unlock the energy sector in this country. Actually declare the process of declaring economic independence from China. Have that sit-down conversation with Xi Jinping pretty early on in my presidency. These are the things I get to do without asking anybody for permission. As your next president running the executive branch of government. Most of it's going to involve shutting down much of that executive branch of government. And I think that's why I'm going to do this a little bit differently than Donald Trump did last time around. Let's have some, candid talk here. Just be honest with me. I'm honest with you, and it's what we got to be with each other. How many of you are leaning towards supporting me right now at the caucus? Good number of you. How many of you are considering Donald Trump for the caucus? Okay. Well, thank you. I understand that, because I think there's two America First candidates in this race. That's Donald Trump and me. But I think I am going to be best positioned to take our America First agenda to the next level. And I think it's going to take somebody with fresh legs. Somebody from the next generation to reach and lead the new generation of Americans. That's what I think it's going to take. We're in the middle of a war in this country. It's not a war between black and white or even Democrat and Republican. It's a war between those of us who love this country and our founding ideals and a fringe minority who hates this country and what we stand for. A war between the permanent state and the everyday citizen. And the way I think about it is if you want a general, a commander-in-chief who will lead us to victory in that war, then we deserve a commander-in-chief who is not yet wounded in that war. That's what I'm bringing to the table. Thomas Jefferson, he was 33 years old when he wrote that Declaration of Independence. And he invented the swivel chair while he was at it, as a funny fact. It's actually true. Yeah, the other people who wrote that declaration. Amazing. I mean, there was something in the water back then. Benjamin Franklin, co-signer of the Declaration, invented a remedy to the common cold, the bifocal spectacle. The Franklin stove is literally named after Benjamin Franklin, an early version of the lightning rod on the top of a home. It's all Benjamin Franklin, a co-signer of the Declaration of Independence. Robert Livingston, while ambassador to France on the side, invents one of the key components of the steamship. I mean, I could go straight down the list. These are our founding fathers. We've lost that founding spirit in this country. These revolutions, they're led by the next generation for a reason. I think it's going to take somebody whose best days in life are still yet ahead. And I don't take that for granted. But we hope that's true for us. We pray that's true for us. I think it's going to take somebody whose best days in life are still yet ahead to see a country whose best days are still ahead of itself, to revive that founding spirit of this country. What's happened is this inner animal spirit, it has been domesticated, it has been tamed, it has been whipped into submission. Our inner animal spirit, our pursuit of excellence, it has leapt oceans to lift up places like China, where their culture of victimhood has come back here to hold us down. When we rallied behind the cry to make America great again, we didn't just hunger for a single man. We hungered for unleashing that pursuit of excellence in this country. That's what it means to be an American. That's what I'm bringing back as your next president. You know what? 8 years from now, if I'm tired and defeated and wounded, get me the heck out of there too and bring in some fresh blood. But right now, I'm the outsider in this race, and that's what it's going to take to revive this country over the next 8 years. You put us there, that's what I deliver you back. Thank you, sir. I appreciate the question. Thank you. Sir, we'll give you the final word right up here. Final word. Oh, you had one? You have one too? Well, second final word, and then we'll go to you.
Right.
Thank you.
I love what you're saying. Love what you guys are doing. Thank you. My question from the executive branch perspective, two of the best ideas I've heard are term limits.
Yep.
And even more importantly, zero-based budgeting. I've been talking about for years and years. You're the first
Thank you.
one to speak of that, but from your executive branch position, how would you accomplish?
Yep. So perfect. Let me just address that in a very technical fashion, and then we'll give the lady there, I think, the final word. Yep. It's good luck, they tell me. You okay back there?
Got me a little excited.
Yeah, you all right back there? Good? Okay. You need some towels. Looks like they're all right. So, zero-based budgeting. Here's how you do it. The executive branch used to ask for permission to spend the money. So what happened is the deep state started to get the president started to get lazy. What the deep state started to do was they started writing the budgets for the presidents. And they changed the language, the appropriations language that used to say may spend, the president or the branch may spend X. They started saying, well, we'll just change that language a little bit. They tinkered with it and say, you shall spend X. And again, if you have a president who's going to get duped, that's what happens. So then the budget comes back, and even if a guy like Trump with the right intention says, oh, I want to not spend this, well, they'll say from the deep state to Mr. President, Congress has said you shall spend it. You don't have a choice. I'm going to change that. Go back to what it used to be. I will ask for permission to spend the money. And I'm going to start with zero as the baseline when determining what we actually need to spend. And if we decide after we get the appropriation that we don't want to spend it, then we're not going to spend it. We're going to give it back to the people of this country. Because that's not my money. It's yours. It belongs to the people of this country. That's how we do zero-based budgeting. Term limits, how do we do it? Two answers. One is, the most important term limit I can deliver, and it's the most important kind we need, is term limits for the bureaucracy. The people who were never elected in the first place, they work for me if I'm your president. So if I can't work for you for more than 8 years, neither should they. 8-year term limits for the bureaucracy, I get to implement that as your president because the Human Resources Department of the federal government, it's called the Office of Personnel Management, reports into the president. That's how I get that done. For term limits for Congress, here's the tough one. You need Congress to vote for the term limit. So you can sort of see what the problem is that we have there. I'm a businessman. I believe in working within the incentives that people have. Here's how we're going to do it. I hate this, but we have to do it this way. We'll tell the people there, you're grandfathered in, and so it doesn't apply to you. Then they're all going to vote for it because this is a wildly popular policy. It's amazing how this works. I kid you not, the same thing goes for banning the trading of stocks. I've argued with so many of these congressmen. The majority of people in this country, just by show of hands, how many of you agree with me? And if you don't agree, don't worry. It's fine, but just be honest. Believe that congressmen and senators should not be engaging in individual stock trading while they're in office. It's like everybody in this room, almost, right? In Congress, it's the other way around. Everyone will raise their hand and say that they deserve the right to do it. It's amazing. I've been in a congressional retreat with the Republican wing of the entire House. And like 90% of them believe they should have the right to do it. So I'll tell them the same thing. Because if you require them to vote for it, then you got to work within the incentives. It doesn't apply to you. Now, the people who are voting them in, now they know that that's going to impress them, they're going to vote for it. So that's how we'll get that done too. So you asked how we'll get zero-based budgeting done and how we'll get term limits done. There you have your answer. Next step is you need to put a president there who can actually implement it. Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. Last word for you. I'll give this lady, since she hasn't had a chance yet, I'll give her the chance. Thank you.
Well, you just talked about health care reform. That's first and foremost on my agenda because in June of 2021, my husband was killed in the hospital.
I'm sorry for your loss, ma'am.
He was murdered because he had not got the vaccine. And when he got sick and he couldn't breathe, he went to the ER. They immediately started him on medications that would make his breathing harder. And less than 24 hours later, they vented him. They filled him with 58 different kinds of medications: fentanyl, propofol, remdesivir, varsinib, you know the names. Okay? One medication has many side effects, black box warnings, and they give something else to combat that. He was given medication for many things that he didn't have. They were simply side effects of this medication. This needs to stop. They need to stop murdering people. And this Obamacare needs to be repealed. This Article 1553 gives the hospitals permission to kill you. That CARES Act needs to be repealed. There is no reason why these pharmaceutical companies and these hospitals and these nurses, nobody has any responsibility. We can't get an attorney to hear us because the attorneys have been told don't take these cases. Everybody has to have a state license, so therefore, if you want your state license, you can't fight for the people who've been wrong. Now, I live the rest of my life without my husband, and there's several of us that get together and have lived this. It's terrible.
I'm sorry for your loss, ma'am, and it's a heart-rending story, and I can't imagine what you're going through, and especially with the anguish that comes from watching a system that you wonder what could have been done differently. It's wrong. And so I'll say this. I don't know about the particulars of this individual case, but we don't have a health care system in this country, actually. That's the thing we have to understand. We have a sick care system. Let's start with that. Apurva is a physician. She's an airway surgeon. She did airway surgery on severe patients during that COVID pandemic. In her case, 3 weeks after an emergency C-section in the ICU and otherwise. And we understand how broken this system is, a system that will pay for expensive pill-pushing behavior because the pharmaceutical industry's lobbied for it. And it's
billed his insurance and Medicare over $1 million.
And it's by design, ma'am. I'm sorry to tell you this, but it's the ugly truth. We have a system that's the product of lobbying. I mean, the pharmaceutical industry prefers not to deliver cures, but to deliver chronic conditions and treatments so that they can continue to actually generate more lasting revenue over one-time revenue. We have a system that's incentivized to only take care of that illness on the back end rather than to prevent the need for those pharmaceuticals on the front end. I say this as somebody, I know this really well. I mean, I came from an industry. I oversaw the development of 5 FDA-approved products. We could have gotten every one of those to the finish line for a fraction of the cost if the FDA hadn't effectively, I'd call it, rigged the system to increase the cost, which in turn reduces competition in the marketplace. And the incentives that physicians have, I mean, I'll just tell you a word about, Purva for a moment. So she does a form of throat surgery that allows people to swallow food who are cancer survivors who haven't swallowed food for years in many cases. And we have a healthcare system that'll pay for all kinds of expensive pill-pushing behavior or feeding tubes or whatever, but doesn't pay for the kinds of procedures that allow those patients to live a better life, actually, to swallow food in certain cases. Now, that's sad. And in our case, thankfully, Apoorva was able to do those procedures without herself getting paid. But that doesn't work system-wide. It's a broken system. And so if we want a solution to this, I'll just give you two simple solutions that I can deliver. I do believe that Obamacare should be repealed. I do believe the so-called ACA, the Affordable Care Act, should be repealed. And I believe that the FDA needs to be drastically reformed. I think the hurdles for getting new drugs approved, I believe in absolute medical choice. Just because something hasn't been approved doesn't mean you shouldn't be able to take it. Just because something has been approved doesn't mean you should have to take it. I think that we should strip pharmaceutical companies of their special liability exemptions, including the liability exemptions for vaccine manufacturers that stop them from being sued in cases of injury. That's what it means to stand for justice in this country. Cut those regulations and the red tape at the FDA that increases the cost of new medicines. Pharma doesn't want that. Too bad. More competition brings down drug prices. And then the health insurance industry has its own special lobbying exemptions from antitrust rules that allows them to coordinate with each other, which sets the prices higher and actually gives us the broken health system that we have today. So that much I can deliver as your next president. But it speaks to the issue of the corruption in our system. Comes back to even the process of getting elected. And I've seen this firsthand right here. Every politician anymore is bought and paid for. If we fix that, we fix the rest of what follows. And sadly, it's going to take somebody who's independent of that system. Right? Just to be blunt about it. Our family, we've put close to $30 million of our hard-earned money. We didn't inherit it. Our hard-earned money into this campaign. That's the inheritance we want to give our kids. More than green pieces of paper, it's the country that we grew up in. That's what's at stake right now, from economic challenges in retirement to the challenges that you and your family have faced for a broken healthcare system that isn't a healthcare system, it's a sick care system. Well, we have a government with the hubris to be able to send our own resources as foreign aid to foreign countries when our own citizens are struggling right here at home. That comes to an end if we have a president who actually stands for the interests of the citizens of this country. If we restore a government that is of the people, for the people, and by the people. We the people who, again, create a government that is accountable to us, not the other way around. And if we do, and that's what's at stake in this election, if we're able to get that right, then we don't anymore have to be this nation in decline. We don't have to be at the end of ancient Rome. I think the truth is, as a nation right now, I was hearing the apologies, that's okay. I would say, what would George Washington say, actually? What would George Washington say if he were in this room? I think he would tell us that as a nation right now, we're really just a little young, actually. That we still do have 250 years left and then some. But it's up to us to step up and actually recreate the ideals that we've lost in this country. That we're going through our own version of our adolescence. Figuring out who we're going to be when we grow up. And when you view it that way, it makes sense again. You go through your adolescence, you do some stupid things. We certainly are as a country right now. But we are stronger for it when we get to our adulthood on the other side. So no, I don't think we have to be that nation in decline. I think we still can be a nation in our ascent. So if you all do your part, that's what I'm asking you for. In about 10 days, here in Iowa, you get to pick the president. Roomfuls like this one. If you all do your part, many of you may be coming for the first time. That's why I think we're going to shock the polls. We're going to shatter the expectation. I think we're going to win the Iowa caucus because of the people in this room. And then we're going to win the general election in a landslide for the same reason, bringing new people into our movement, bringing the next generation along. If you all do your part, I promise you, Apoorva and I and our family, we are going to do ours to make sure that our kids, is that your son with you, ma'am? That our kids grow up in a country where they still get ahead, you still get ahead with your own hard work. your own commitment, your own dedication. And that you know what? You are free to speak your mind at every step of the way. That is the American dream. That is what we are running to. And with your help, in about 10 days, that is what we are going to revive to save this great country. Thank you for coming out today, guys. God bless you and your families, and may God bless our United States of America. Thank you. God bless. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, man. I appreciate it. For your time to stay for some pictures.
All right, that's the vision, that's the plan. We need you to join us to get it done. January 15th, please sign up with one of us.
With your help, we will. I think we will.
We're going to commit to caucus with Vivek. There's a couple more folks to be precinct captains for us.
Thank you, guys. Good to see you guys.
Good to see you guys.
Thank you, guys. Love you guys. Love you guys. We're going to do this, guys.
Yes, we are.
Great to see you, sir, leader.
Thank you so much.
We just so appreciate getting a chance to hear as much as we have.
It's the honor's mine. The honor's mine, and we take that responsibility seriously.
Nice to meet you.
We're going to do it together.
Yes,
Thank you.
thank
Thank you.
you. You are genuine.
Thank you.
Thank you so
We're going to do it. And I would love to
Bye.
wear your hats, sir. Thank you for your service.
Oh,
I appreciate
I
it.
would
Remind our
love
kids
to.
that, too.
Can I give
Thank
this?
you.
Sorry, I'm going to
Thank you.
squirt it everywhere otherwise.
It's good to see you. Thank you.
Good to see you.
Thank you. We're going to do this.
All right.
guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
It's good to see you. Yes, I would love to.
Take a sip.
And then I would love to shake your hand.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's an honor. Thank you, sir. We're going to do this. I think we're going to
Thank you.
save this country. Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Oh, good. I'm grateful.
Yes.
Bring your generation along.
Thank you.
That's, we're doing it for your
Were you on
generation.
crutches then?
Proud of you.
Oh,
Proud of you. Thank you for being here. That means a lot. Thank you, guys.
Oh,
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
But I got your sign
up along the interstate, so
thank you.
they only left one.
Oh,
I
and we
need
would love
2 or
that.
3 more.
Oh,
Be
I think we've
precinct
got plenty
captain or
more.
anything else, we would
Thank
love
you
that.
so much.
Could spread this message. I'm glad you got the book. And
200 mark.